Welcome and thank you for joining us for this episode in the Fearless Minds research series, Friends or Foes, Movement Ecology of the Funnelweb Spider. I'm Mike Gardner from the Fearless Minds team and Professor of Biodiversity and Ecology at Flinders University. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to today's discussion as we explore the mysteries of funnelweb spiders. To begin with, I'd like to acknowledge that we're hosting this discussion on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and that we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We also acknowledge and convey our deep appreciation to the elders of all the nations upon which Flinders operates. This story is delivered as part of our Fearless Minds series. Throughout the series, we'll meet some of Flinders University's most engaging early to mid-career researchers as they bring you their latest research from a diverse range of fields. Today, we are fortunate to be hearing from Dr. Bruno Buzatto from Flinders University's College of Science and Engineering. Bruno is a terrestrial ecologist and evolutionary biologist whose research mainly focuses on insects and arachnids. He has an ongoing research project funded by National Geographic on the movement ecology of the famous Sydney funnelweb spider. Bruno, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
So the funnelweb spider, a creepy crawly infamous for its venom, which has the ability to kill a human in just 15 minutes. So Bruno, what do we know about the funnelweb spider?
We actually know quite a lot, Mike, about its venom. So that's very well studied. And you're right, it can actually kill a human pretty quickly, but they have a very bad reputation. And in reality, since the antivenom was discovered in 1983, which is the year I was born, no one has died, and only 14 records of human deaths due to the funnelweb spider ever. So they're not as dangerous as their reputation might suggest. So we know a lot about their venom. We know a lot about the fact that they breed in summer. So males leave, so this is a male, and they leave their burrows never to return in summer, looking for females to mate with. But that's about it. We know very little about their actual ecology.
Yeah, so that's amazing that we know so much about things that affect humans, but then to know something about the biology of the animal is quite, unique. We don't know that much about them. That's pretty
Absolutely,
useless, so
yeah.
have it out. Okay, so the funnelweb spider is quite mysterious in its movements, and there is much we don't actually know about them, Bruno. So can you explain how much we still have to learn about their movement ecology? So where do they go during the breeding season? How far do they go?
Absolutely. So this is part of this project I'm involved with. We are using these micro radio transmitters, attaching them to males and following them during the breeding season. Because the reality is we know nothing. We know that they're out and about during summer, but that's pretty much it. We don't know how far a single animal how much distance they can cover in total over their breeding season, how much per night, what sort of environmental factors influence their movements. Are they moving more in warmer nights, which is quite likely? We know that they prefer to do all their walking about and looking for females when it's humid, right after rain. So that's been long known. But we don't know the specifics, and there's no hard data for any of this. There's only impressions from amateurs who really like the spiders and observe them, but we actually don't have very little science on what they're actually doing.
So Bruno, you've just been to New South Wales recently to do a project on Sydney funnelweb spiders. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. So the main part of the project was to look at the males' movements, but that's usually in summer. So as I said before, the males are out in summer, and we're trying to figure out things like how long a male can go in one night, how far they disperse throughout the breeding season, what influences their dispersal. So are they moving more on warmer nights, which is quite likely. We already know that they prefer to move after rain when everything is very humid. They have a dehydration problem, so they can't walk about in very dry, hot nights. But that's all in summer. My recent trip now was focused on covering the range of this genus. Sydney funnelweb spiders belong to the genus Atrax. There are 3 described species in the genus, but a few more to be described. And we were covering the range of the genus in the south and mid and south coast of New South Wales and looking for the different populations to study them genetically and figure out how many species there actually are in the genus, because it seems like there are more.
So I think the males have more venom than the females, don't they? So can you tell us why that might be?
No one really knows, but a really good hypothesis, and there's some recent research, not by me, but by other people, showing that it's quite likely that because the males are walking around during summer to reproduce, they are more exposed to predators. So a venom that is quite potent against mammals, who are one of their main predators probably, is an adaptation, a defense mechanism for the males. The females don't need that because they don't leave their burrows.
So I noticed that the Funnelwebs have a very interesting web. Can you tell us a bit more about that name?
Sure. So Funnelweb, it's because their web is kind of like a funnel. To be honest, I don't think it's a fantastic name. It doesn't exactly look like a funnel. I don't know what you think. But basically, normally you find things like that when you flip a rock or a log, and they're right under. And they have multiple entrances. As you can see, 3 here. Different species will have different numbers because we have more than one species of Funnelweb. And this usually goes into the ground, and there's a burrow where the spider lives the vast majority of their time.
So Bruno, in South Australia, you're going to be looking at some different spiders, aren't you? These ones are associated with the pygmy blue tongue. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're hoping to find there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have Funnelweb spiders in South Australia, but they're very rare and hard to find. But another group of spiders we have very abundantly, even in the Adelaide Hills, is Trapdoor spiders. And for instance, this species here is the one that your pygmy blue-tongue lizards like to use the burrows to live inside. And they're quite abundant and spread across the greater metropolitan area. However, again, little is known about their ecology and very little is known about the genetic structure of their populations. So if it turns out that in the future we need to understand where the spiders are, where are their healthy populations, perhaps even move spiders around to create habitat for this endangered lizard, it will be interesting and important to understand the genetic structure of the different populations so that when we move them around, we're also focusing on the preservation, the conservation of the spiders at the same time as the lizards.
That's a fundamental part of the story, understanding how the spiders are interacting and how many species there are, for example. We don't even know that yet, do we?
That's exactly right. There has been a recent study on the systematics of this particular genus. However, much is still can be done, especially looking at the molecular side of things and genetically delineating where the different species are. Because that's an interesting thing about Funnelweb spiders and Trapdoor spiders. Closely related species are extremely similar morphologically. You can't tell them apart almost, especially if you're looking at the females. So you need the genetics side of it as well.
So many people couldn't think of anything worse than handling some of the creepy crawlies like spiders and things that you work with every day. So what drives your curiosity for insects and arachnids? What's behind your fascination?
I think initially it's because when you get down to their scale, when you look them closely, for instance, when you look at an insect or a spider under the microscope, you realize that they live in a different scale and there's a different universe there and they look amazing. And there's all these surprises and things that constantly blow my mind about them. But I also think I just lack that. A lot of people instinctively are afraid of these things or are disgusted by it. I just, thankfully for me, I think I lack that. I've never been afraid of them. I've always been very fascinated and they've always been surprising me. I am actually afraid of big cockroaches, but that's a different story. But with spiders and most insects, I just love them. They're fascinating in their own right if you look close enough.
Right, so it's really fascinating listening to your stories about spiders and your interests. Do you have any advice for anyone who might be thinking of pursuing a research career in this field?
Yeah, well, I think, and this links to what I just said, I think it is important to do, when doing research, it is important that you are really interested, you're fascinated about the thing you're studying. This is important to drive you, to give you the motivation to push through any hardships. But I also would like to say, and I say that to students usually, is keep your mind open about how interesting something can be. Because if you look closely enough, sometimes things that might look uninteresting and boring, in biology, they will always surprise you and blow your mind. The animals are always more interesting than you can imagine. So keeping your mind open about how cool they can be and finding something that actually fascinates you, I think it's a good idea.
So thanks so much, Bruno, for talking to us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
Remember, you can watch any of our Fearless Minds episode on the Flinders YouTube channel. We hope you keep an eye out for the next one. Thank you once again. Bye for now.